What the fuck? Get me the fuck out of here. I hate fucking renting.
If you live in an apartment, I have two pieces of news for you. The good news is that you still have a roof over your head tonight. The bad news is that next month's bill could push your entire family into homelessness. Sound extreme. Imagine signing a lease at what looks like a great price and moving in. But on the first day of the next month, before you have even settled in, more new charges show up and push your bill up by hundreds of dollars. That's right, you heard me correctly. That is the reality of apartments today. You sign the lease, and that is only the beginning of a long string of ridiculous payments that come later. So how is the real price of an apartment being hidden? Why are renters paying more and more while having less and less control? And if the whole thing is so unreasonable, why don't they just move out? Watch this video before you sign another lease. One small mistake could cost you thousands of extra dollars over the next year. I bet almost everyone who has ever looked for an apartment has made this mistake, at least once, seeing the number printed in huge letters on the listing or written in the lease, and assuming that is what they will pay every month. No. In many cases, that is only the starting point. The real cost of living there does not show up until the bill is due and all the little charges start crawling out of the statement. Listen to what happened to this woman.
I pay all of my fees for July, all my move-in fees, my rent, my insurance, all of it. All of it. It's August 1st, right? So everybody knows rent's fucking due on the 1st, right? Log on to my lovely little portal app. What do I 1,200 and some bullshit? What the do you mean? What the do you mean? My rent on my legal document, my signed lease, including pet fees, which I no longer should have because he's an ESA dog, was $972. A lot on its own. Why is it now $230 more? What the is good?
Put aside the angry language for a moment and look at what she is actually saying. According to the woman, she had already paid all her move and cost her July rent insurance and everything else she was required to pay. Her signed lease listed the rent, including the pet fee, as $972 a month. She also believed the pet fee should no longer apply because her dog was an emotional support animal, although the clip does not provide enough documentation to confirm that. But on August 1st, when she logged into the payment app, she saw a total of more than $1,200, about $230 more than the amount she had used to plan her budget. She checked the entire statement, immediately messaged the landlord, and said that another resident in the complex was also complaining about being charged more than expected. At this point, we do not have an explanation from management. We cannot conclude that this was an illegal charge, a system error, or a fee that had been included somewhere in the lease. But one thing is very clear, she only discovered the new amount on the exact day the rent was due, after signing the lease, paying the moving costs, and moving her entire life into that apartment. And this is the real trap. Another person looking for an apartment in Los Angeles said they found a one-bedroom apartment advertised for $2,500 a month. That number alone is already enough to make many families think twice. But that price did not include utilities. Parking cost extra. The amenities were nothing special. Applicants also had to prove an income of about 3 times the rent and have a minimum credit score of 650. At the end of the listing, this person discovered another recurring fee tied to the electronic key. The rent is printed in huge numbers, so the apartment shows up in your search filters. Everything else is broken into smaller charges and given names that sound completely harmless. Parking fee, technology fee, trash, processing fee, environmental fee, pet fee, payment fee, or a resident service package. One comment summed up the absurdity perfectly. They rent you a place, charge you to park at that place, and then charge you again to enter that place. Each charge may not look like much on its own. $30 here, $50 there. Another technology charge, another trash processing charge. But $50 a month comes to $600 a year. A $230 difference like the one in the clip adds up to $2,760 over 12 months. That is no longer a pocket change. It is an increase in housing costs divided into several smaller lines so it looks less frightening. And by the time renters see the full bill, they may have already paid the application fee, gone through a credit check, paid the security deposit, and moved their belongings in, and turned down other apartments. So do not just ask, how much is the rent? Ask this after adding every charge. I cannot refuse what is the real monthly cost of living here. Because the trap is not one single fee. The trap is that the number you see before signing the lease may be completely different from the number waiting for you in the app on the first day of the month. And once you lose control over the price you have to pay, it will not take long before you also lose control over the place you call home. Why do you move out on your own? For freedom. So you do not have to ask your parents for permission, and when you come home late, explain where you're going or depend on anyone else to enter the place you call home. But ironically, after paying thousands of dollars every month for that independence, a management company now gets to decide which services you must use, which systems you must accept, and how much extra you must pay to keep living in your own apartment. One resident said she had lived in this apartment complex for about 4 years. Everything used to work in a familiar way. Then management sent out a letter announcing that the property, which had more than 200 apartments, would be switching to a new technology system. According to the resident, this was not a discussion. No one asked more than 200 households whether they wanted the change. There was no option to keep the old system. The decision had already been made, and the renters were simply told that they would have to adjust from that point forward. That is the important part. The renters are the people who live there every day. They are the ones who have to use the system, deal with the inconvenience, and face the consequences when it fails. But they are not the ones who get to decide how their own apartment building operates. Management calls it an upgrade. Residents may call it a notice telling them that their freedom to choose has just disappeared. And that is not all. The new system also came with something called a technology connection fee. The building's internet service was originally presented as an option. Many residents did not sign up because they already had their own provider. But according to the person telling the story, the technology fee still appeared on everyone's bill at $85 a month. The service is optional. The fee does not seem to understand what the word optional means. The renters did not choose the product. They did not choose the provider. They did not negotiate the price. They were not even allowed to say they did not need the service. But in the end, they were still the ones paying the bill. This is how control slowly changes hands. The management company decides which system gets installed. The company decides which services get bundled into the apartment. The company gives the fee its name. The company can change how the building operates. The renters are left with only 2 choices: accept it or to leave. That may sound like a choice, but once you have paid the security deposit, moved all your belongings, settled into your job, and built a life there, leaving is not simple at all. I will come back to that later. And this is the biggest contradiction: you still carry every responsibility of an independent adult paying the rent on time, taking care of the apartment, and following the lease. But the power to make decisions about your own home is increasingly in someone else's hands. You moved out of your parents' house so you would not have to ask anyone for permission. Congratulations. Now, management will tell you which services are optional, which fees are mandatory, and in a moment I will show you how they can even control the way you enter your own apartment. Apartment management companies really know how to make money. They take a basic function of an apartment, give it a modern-sounding name, and find a way to turn it into a monthly payment. Very creative. The only problem is that renters do not get another room, another parking space, or anything new. They just get to keep walking through the door of the place they already pay rent for. Let's see what this apartment hunter in Los Angeles discovered.
Okay, 1 bedroom, no utilities included. You have to pay for your parking. Bare bones, 3 times the rent, $650 minimum credit, okay? I scroll down to the bottom and I see that in order for you to access your unit that you are paying $2,500 for, okay, you must subscribe to a monthly membership to use your key fob. If you don't, you will not be able to access your unit that you pay $2,500 for. What are we doing? I know why people are burning down warehouses, and I know why people are running up on CEOs and sending them back to their maker. People are tired, and it is only going to get worse.
Okay, in the clip she says the 1-bedroom apartment was advertised for $2,500 a month. Utilities were not included. Parking cost extra. The renter had to prove an income of 3 times the rent and have a minimum credit score of 650. But at the end of the listing, she found something even harder to believe. According to what she read, residents had to maintain a monthly subscription to use the door access card. Without the subscription, they could not enter the apartment they were paying $2,500 to rent. We do not have the full lease or a response from management, so we cannot know exactly how the fee was described or what conditions came with it. But her question is completely reasonable. You already pay rent for the apartment. Why should entering that apartment require another subscription? You are no longer just a renter. Apparently, you also have to maintain your membership to open the door. What a luxury amenity, pay for the apartment first, then pay extra to access the thing you just rented. And this is not just an issue with one listing. Another resident said their apartment complex replaced the old access card system with a phone app. Before the upgrade, they could simply tap the card against the reader, and the door would open almost immediately. After the upgrade, residents had to take out their phones, unlock the screen, find the app, turn on the wireless connection, hold the phone near the reader, and wait about 3 to 5 seconds. In the elevator, the delay sometimes caused renters to pass their floor, because the elevator had already started moving before the system confirmed access. At first, that may sound like a small inconvenience, but place those few seconds in a dark parking garage when someone realizes they are being followed, or when someone is running from a robber carrying a small child, or too panicked to find the right app. In a technical report, 3 seconds is only a delay. In real life, 3 seconds can be the distance between danger and a safe door. Getting into your home now depends on a whole chain of things working properly. The phone must have battery power, the app must still be logged, and the connection must work. The reader must recognize the signal, and the building system must be online. If just one part fails, residents may be left standing outside the very place they are paying to live in. Then there is privacy. An electronic system can create data showing when residents leave home when they return, and which doors they use. There is no evidence in these sources that the data has been sold or exposed, but renters have a right to know who can see it, how long it is stored, and what happens if their account is compromised. In the second case, the resident said the technology fee was as high as $85 a month and was tied to the new system, even though the internet service had originally been presented as an option. Management calls this an upgrade. Renters get more steps, more things that can fail, more safety concerns, less privacy, and a new bill. A door that is supposed to protect residents is slowly becoming a subscription service they are not allowed to refuse. Whenever renters push back against an unreasonable fee, someone always offers a solution that sounds incredibly smart. If you don't like it, move. Wonderful. As if moving only means stuffing your clothes into a suitcase, walking across the street, and choosing a cheaper apartment. No credit check, no proof of income, no security deposit, and certainly no need to worry that the next apartment might be charging the same kinds of fees. Someone already struggling with rent of $2,500 a month may not have several $1,000s sitting in the bank, so they can leave. Moving somewhere else can mean application fees, background check fees, holding fees, a security deposit, first month's rent, a moving truck utility connection fees, and penalties, if the old lease has not ended yet. Even before getting approved, renters may already lose money on several different applications. The Los Angeles apartment in the story also required income equal to 3 times the rent, and a minimum credit score of 650. That means you do not just need enough money to move. You also have to prove to the new place that you are qualified to keep paying them. So why not buy a house? Because someone who has no money left after paying rent, food, transportation, insurance, and utilities will have a very hard time saving for a down payment. Even if they qualify for a mortgage, they still have to deal with interest, property taxes, home insurance, repairs, and an emergency fund. Moving to a cheaper area is not simple either. Their job, their children's schools, their relatives, and their family support system may all be in the city where they currently live. An apartment 2 hours away is not really cheaper. If you have to spend more on gas, lose more time commuting, or leave your current job to find a new one. This is where the story goes beyond one lock or one apartment complex. Housing is increasingly being managed like a revenue stream. Companies do not just charge you for the space where you live. They separate every part of daily life and turn it into a recurring payment parking trash. Pets technology, resident packages, utilities, and access to basic features that used to be taken for granted. You rent the apartment, then you rent the parking space. You rent the technology service. You rent every part of the place you already rented. That is why the phrase "you will own nothing" gets such a strong reaction from people. It is not because the current sources prove that one specific corporation owns every home in America. What the phrase reflects is the feeling that people have to keep paying while having less and less control. The channel's own audience research also shows that many families still count as middle class on paper, but in reality they are only a few bills away from a crisis. And please do not call this a healthy free market. A free market should give customers the right to say no, transparent pricing, and realistic alternatives. But imagine this. You pay rent, pay utilities, follow the lease, and yet a basic function in your home is still locked behind a fee you were never allowed to negotiate. What is that? This no longer looks like competitive capitalism. It looks more like corporate rule. One side writes the terms, chooses the services, sets the price, and changes the system, while the other side is only allowed to pay or leave. Of course, you are still free. Free to accept it, free to pay more, or free to find several $1,000s so you can move somewhere else. Meanwhile, many workers say their wages are not rising fast enough to keep up with costs, while finding a better job is becoming harder and harder. The lack of money, alternative jobs, and suitable housing is exactly what takes away a renter's ability to say no. Pay attention. This is only the beginning, because major changes rarely show up under the name loss of control. They are usually introduced as an upgrade, a new amenity, and a fee small enough that an ordinary person cannot afford to leave yet. At this point, it would be too easy and far too irresponsible for me to just simply tell everyone to read the lease carefully. Management makes money from every line of fees, so renters also need to check every line before handing over an application fee, a security deposit, and control over the place where they will live. The first thing to do before applying is to ask for a complete written fee sheet, not a verbal answer like, "There are probably just a few small charges." Ask them to clearly list 3 numbers: the total amount due before moving and the total mandatory monthly amount, and the total costs that may come up when moving out. Before getting approved, ask whether the application fee is charged per person or per apartment, whether the credit check fee is refundable, and what happens to the holding fee if the application is denied. Before moving in, you need to know the exact security deposit, first month's rent, administrative fees, key fees, utility connection fees, renter's insurance, and any charges related to pets. Then come the monthly bills, parking trash processing technology, internet shared utilities, insurance, resident packages, payment fees, and any charge that cannot. And ask for the answer by email. A verbal promise will not fix next month's bill. Next, calculate the real price yourself. Take the base rent and add every mandatory fee: utilities, internet, insurance, and parking. Do not let the payment app be the first place that tells you the total. The price in the listing helps the apartment show up in your search filter. The full bill determines whether you can make it through the end of the month. When you receive the lease, do not just skim from beginning to end and sign it. Search for words such as fee, technology, resident package, utilities, trash, parking, pets, insurance, renewal, third-party provider, and subject to change. Most importantly, ask whether management has the right to add new fees or raise fees during the lease term. If so, which clause allows it? How much notice must they give? Is there a limit on the increase? A vague clause like other fees may apply should make you stop immediately. Do not sign and hope everything works out. Hope is not a financial plan. With electronic locks, do not just ask whether the building has smart technology. Ask them to demonstrate the entire process. How do you get in if your phone battery dies? What happens if the app fails? How do the doors and elevators work during a power outage? Is there a physical key backup card or emergency code? Who helps you get inside at night? Is there an emergency entry fee? If the lock system fails, who is responsible and who pays the cost? The backup option must work 24 hours a day and cannot depend on the same phone that is having the problem. Call the support number in the app is not a backup plan, when the app itself is the thing that does not work. Privacy also needs to be addressed clearly. Does the app store entry and exit records? Can management or the technology provider see them? How long is the data kept? When you move out, are the account and history deleted? If your phone is lost, how is access blocked? Not every electronic system is dangerous, but a lock should not require renters to hand over more data they do not understand, just to use the basic right to enter their home. Before moving day, save the listing, the advertised price, the fee sheet, the lease, every addendum emails with the leasing staff and payment receipts. Take pictures of the apartment's condition, the doors, the locks, and the equipment. Later, if the bill suddenly goes up, you will have evidence to compare it against. When the amount in the app does not match the lease, do not just call and let the issue fade away. Take a screenshot of the statement, send a dispute by email, and ask management to identify the clause that allows each charge. Laws vary by location, so do not withhold the entire rent payment on your own before checking local rules or getting the right assistance. You cannot fix the entire housing market with one checklist, but you can force the apartment complex to reveal the real price before it holds your security deposit and all your belongings. Do not just look at whether the apartment is attractive. Check the bill, the lease, the door, and the way out. A place is only truly a home when you know how much you have to pay, and you're certain you can always get inside. In the end, this story is not just about an $85 fee, an electronic lock, or an apartment in Los Angeles. It is about how renters are being forced to pay more while getting less control over the place where they live. The advertised price is no longer the real price. Services that used to be considered a normal part of an apartment are being separated, given new names, and turned into monthly charges. Management chooses the system, sets the fees, and changes how the building operates. And renters carry the bill, the inconvenience, and the risk when something goes wrong. The most troubling part is that this model could slowly become normal if no one questions it. So look beyond the beautiful kitchen and the swimming pool in the advertisement. Ask for the total cost, read every addendum, check the backup plan, and demand every promise in writing. Because you are not just renting 4 walls. You are paying for stability, privacy, safety, and the right to live in your own home without having to ask permission from another system. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep seeing America through what people are actually experiencing. I will see you in the next video.